Okay, I see that we're live. All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome. My name is Hana Alasry. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm a writer with About Islam, and I'm also the founder of SALIM Life Coaching, which is a life coaching platform that helps Muslims to prepare for and enrich their marriages, as well as heal chronic childhood trauma. So today, our session is going to be about exploring, are you really ready for marriage? So hopefully by the end of today's live session, you guys are not necessarily going to know for sure, yes, I am ready, or no, I'm not ready, but at least you're going to be able to start having the conversation about what it is that helps me to prepare for marriage. And so this is a conversation that is meant for people who are not yet married. Maybe you're not really looking for someone, but you hope to be married in the future. Maybe you are looking for someone, or you are currently engaged. These are the types of conversations that are really important before you commit to someone. So there is a really famous divorce lawyer, and he recently, I believe in the past year, came out with a best-selling book along the lines of, if you're in my office, it's too late. So someone who's worked with hundreds of couples, helping them to negotiate their divorce. And so he had a really good insight into what is it that caused these divorces to happen, what caused these marriages to break apart. And he, in a lecture, said something that I found really interesting. And he said, if I told you that every time you walk outside, you have a 50% chance of getting hit in the head with a bowling ball, would you go outside? And he said, I bet that a bunch of us would never go outside. If it's a 1 in 2 chance that you're going to get hit in the head with a bowling ball, you're not going to go outside. Or at the very least, you're going to wear a helmet. And I thought this is a really good metaphor to use to kind of explain the way that we treat marriage. So when he's talking about that 1 in 2 chance, that 50% chance of getting hit in the head with a bowling ball, he's talking about the fact that there is, depending on the stat you're looking at, somewhere around a 50% rate of divorce still in the United States. And so with such a life-changing decision, if it has such a high frequency of failure, then it would make sense for us to, at the very least, to wear a metaphorical helmet, right? In doing so, we are preparing ourselves. We're trying to understand how prepared we are. We're trying to gather the skills, the knowledge, and the education to be able to make sure that we are our best partner coming into a marriage, and we're also choosing the best partner for us. Even if ultimately things don't work out for you, at least you can say that you came to this relationship with the best version of yourself. So oftentimes in the Muslim community, when we think about the question, are you ready for marriage, we typically focus on physical skills and physical resources. So for example, if someone asks, and these are kind of stereotypical examples, but it's just to make the point or help explain what I mean. We might ask, so-and-so, is your son ready for marriage? And the mother might reply, yeah, he has a stable job, or yeah, he's actually renting an apartment or looking for an apartment right now. Yeah, he has a car. And so as you can see, these are all very physical examples, and they're practical examples. They're important, but it's only part of the picture. Same thing on other examples might be life skills that we think about. Yeah, so-and-so knows how to cook really well, or they know how to clean, or yes, they've been living on their own for X amount of months. Whatever it might be, all of these things are important. I'm not saying that they're not important. Financial stability is obviously very important. Having life skills is extremely important, because otherwise you're going to be in a lot of trouble when the real world hits you. But these are not the skills and resources that are most consequential to your happiness, to the longevity of your relationship, and to fulfillment in your marriage, especially a Muslim one. So what I'm trying to do is challenge us to start thinking about outside of these very kind of basic, it's easy to find a job, and really many people can go ahead and look for an apartment or a place to live. But the harder things to do is to make sure that we as individuals, as Muslims, are prepared for a relationship that is going to involve someone else's well-being, someone else's heart, someone else's vulnerability. And so a few things to think about, right, is how are we in terms of our emotional preparedness for marriage? And how are the non-tangible skills, or sometimes they're referred to as soft skills, that we have? And if we're falling short, what are we doing to make sure that we're able to build those skills? So for example, one question you can ask yourself before ever considering getting married is, how do I communicate? How well do I communicate? And communication is more than just what I'm doing here. It is, how well am I able to string together a sentence to explain what I really am thinking inside my head? How well can I articulate myself? Another thing is, how well am I able to communicate something in an emotionally intense situation without getting emotionally overwhelmed? How am I able to communicate something carefully, subtly, and not hurt another person unintentionally? Right? These are all different elements of communication. All of these things can be learned. If they are not learned, then it can cause a lot of rift in a relationship. Other things to think about, right? How are you at comforting someone? Do you know how to comfort someone? Do you come from a family where comforting someone was actually not something you did, so you never actually learned how to comfort someone? Are you someone who comforts more so based on physical touch? Maybe you're a hugger, or you'll put your arm around someone. Are you a comforter through your words? You like to affirm people, or you like to give them a pep talks, or you like to help them sort through their problems, whatever it is. Do you know how to do it? And if so, how do you do it? Another question to think about is, how do you manage your anger? Do you manage your anger well? Are you someone who's pretty easygoing? It takes a lot to get you angry. Do you know how to negotiate with someone? Do you know how to manage conflict with someone? Do you know how to pick and choose your battle? So all of these are questions, and I'm just giving these as examples. This is not necessarily a list that you need to check off, but these are just things to explore and understand your ability to do. One thing that I often share with people, and to kind of give insight into really the difficulty of maintaining a healthy marriage, and this is not to be discouraging, but again, it's to place a magnifying glass on this conversation and to help us be a little more realistic. And hopefully when we do that, it kind of lights a fire for us to start moving towards working on these skills that I kind of mentioned previously. So if anyone watching this has siblings, right, you have a brother or a sister, you and your siblings likely have the same two parents. You probably lived in the same household all your lives together, unless they had to leave for some reason, but a good chunk of your life was likely spent with your sibling. You guys grew up in very similar environments, probably under similar social norms, family norms. You guys might have, you have a certain amount of even genetic similarities because that is your sibling. And yet, how many of us can ever say that we've never gotten into a fight with our sibling? I can't say that. And so when you think about the fact that when all of the stars aligned, similar upbringing, similar environment, similar social norms, similar social values for siblings, and conflict still happened. Now imagine taking two separate people, now opposite gender, completely, maybe not completely, but for sure different upbringings. You didn't live with the same family, perhaps different social classes, perhaps different interests, perhaps different religiosity levels, so many different differences. And never working on the skills to get to know each other and how to communicate well and how to resolve conflict and manage conflict. What is going to happen? If you're not working on these things, you're not thinking about your preparedness for marriage, well, you're kind of setting yourself up for a lot of conflict. And it doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to explode and it's all going to end, but it does mean you're setting yourself up for something that you really could help mitigate from the very beginning. So one big question to ask yourself, and if you're going to take anything away from today's Facebook Live, take this away and use this as your starting point to understanding whether or not you're prepared for marriage. What is your understanding of marriage? Ask yourself that question. What is my understanding of marriage? Is marriage for you truly, is it just a kind of a legal bond? It's to get your physical needs met. It's so that you can have children. It's so that you can move out of your family's house, whatever it might be. Is that what it is for you? Is there something deeper than that? Are you looking to connect with another person? What is your understanding of marriage? Another thing to think about, what is your understanding of the Quran's explanation of marriage? How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teach us about marriage? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasize in the Quran on marriage? How did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam communicate marriage to us? What are the hadith about marriage and what do they tell us? What is your connection with that? And so these are really big questions, but when you start off asking these questions, what ends up happening is you are able to get a good, almost like a primer for where you are mentally and emotionally in this journey, right? And once you can do that, you start noticing all these gaps like, oh, I actually don't really know what I want in a marriage. Oh, I didn't really understand the Quranic explanation or the Quranic framework for marriage. I wonder how that could affect the health of my marriage if I don't know that. Or if the other person doesn't know that, and we're not coming to the same terms and understanding of how we want our marriage to operate. So it's really important to have these reflective moments. Now, on a more kind of bringing in the objective part of our deen, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's a very famous hadith, and it's very often cited in the time of proposal, but I think it is something that can be used as a very, very good framework for marriage preparedness. So you may have heard, if, and forgive me because I'm paraphrasing this, but whoever comes to you and you're pleased with their deen and their khuluq, so their religion and their character, marry them. If you do not, there will be corruption and great harm on earth. So again, oftentimes we use this when someone's coming to ask, and you are interested in that person, or it's a conversation maybe that parents will have with their children, like, this is a good person, would you consider them? But let's kind of rewind. So the two elements that the Prophet ﷺ is emphasizing here is deen and akhlaq, your religiosity and your character. So when we're talking about readiness for marriage, or are you prepared for marriage? These are the two elements to think about. Where are you in your understanding of deen? Where are you in your religiosity? Are you happy with where you're at? And if you had to rate yourself from a scale of 1 to 5, where would you rate yourself? Are you okay with that? How's your salah? How is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are you in terms of your sins? Are there any particular sins that you're struggling with? How are you in your relationship with the Quran? How are you in your relationship with your parents, which is also a very big part of our deen? Assess these for yourselves. And it's really important to have a good understanding of this, because when you get married, unfortunately, a common myth we hear is that that person is going to make you better. That person is going to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In our deen, there is only one person whose job it is to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is yours. It is not the job of another person. And it's very unfair and also unrealistic to expect another person to drive you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What happens when things get rough and you revert back to the very same habits, religious habits you had over and over again? That's not their fault. That is something that you have to deal with. So again, assess these different elements of your deen, right? And think about it. And then when you start thinking about it, maybe you're going to realize, maybe I'm not the best Muslim that I should be. Maybe these are the things I need to work on. Now you have a plan that you can use to help prepare you for marriage, because as you gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you're increasing yourself in the habits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, you are going to be in that time refining this closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you are now going to be able to enjoy the barakah, the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places in your life, and that is going to make you a better partner just as is. Now, on to the next. Khuluq, right? Character. This is a point that is often overlooked tremendously, and it's very, very disheartening because poor character cannot be fixed. And if you're coming into a relationship with poor character, all of those other skills that we talked about previously, being able to comfort someone, being able to communicate with someone, being able to manage your anger with someone, you're not going to be good at that. And if you are not good at that, the foundation of your marriage is broken. And it is, again, not someone else's job to help perfect or better your character. And in fact, we know this psychologically, it's actually very hard for someone else to do that for you. You really have to make that commitment. You have to decide that for yourself. And so that's when it comes down to character. And we know, and there's another beautiful hadith, one of my favorite personally, is that there's no deed that weighs heavier on the scales on the day of judgment than good manners or good character. And so that is very, very powerful motivation for us to work on our character. So start thinking about, where do you lapse in character, right? And when you're looking at these, really think about it from the perspective of another person. If you were meeting someone who had your character, would you marry that person? And if the answer is a resounding yes, I would, then awesome, cool. You are right where you need to be. If there's hesitation, if you're kind of like, I don't think I would want someone who has these characteristics, then that means before you marry someone, it's time to work and refine this character. And this is something you can do at any religiosity level. It doesn't matter if you feel like you're at the top of your game or you're just barely scratching the surface in terms of your deen. You can perfect your character. I'm sure all of us can think about people that we know who have amazing character, even if they're not even Muslim, right? So don't feel discouraged as if, oh, my deen is kind of weak. How am I gonna fix my character? When you think about character, there's so many different elements of character, but how do you treat people? How do you talk to people? Are you honest at baseline? Are you trustworthy? Are you gentle in your speech? Are you someone people like to be around and you make them feel happy and you make them feel joyous and they just enjoy your energy? Are you someone who's charitable? Are you generous? Do you find yourself being very grateful? These are all different elements of character. And so just go ahead and think about, even if you're to create a list, what makes up good character and where do I fall on all these things? Other questions you can ask is, why do I fall wherever I do on the spectrum? And how can I improve that? So ultimately, I think the best example of what deen in khuluq looks like in a marriage is when you think about the Prophet ﷺ's marriage to Khadija radiallahu anha. And the beauty of this marriage is the marriage wasn't just beautiful and flourishing and fulfilling and amazing because it just so happened to be that way. It was very well understood that the two people in this marriage had exceptional character, even before the Prophet ﷺ was a prophet. So deen wasn't even yet in the picture, right? Because the Prophet had not received prophethood, but the character was impeccable. And we don't have a tremendous amount of literature on the Prophet ﷺ's marriage to Khadija, but we have enough to where you can see the hints of that beautiful character and the way they treated each other with the respect and kindness and gentleness and generosity, and they were loving to each other and they sacrificed for each other. And these are the elements. So when you think about the kind of marriage you want, I would hope all of us want a marriage like that, because we hopefully want to have a marriage that when we come home, we feel like we're at peace, right? And that's one of the ways in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes marriage, is that this is the person ideally that you are to feel at peace with, right? You should have sakina between you two. So that is a good, if you have time, there are plenty of lectures even on YouTube just to look up about the Prophet ﷺ's marriage to Khadija, and just listen to that and reflect on it and think about, wow, what are the lessons that I can pull from that story? Another thing that we often don't think about, and this perhaps is, it can be so detrimental to a relationship, is not healing from previous issues in our life. And so at SALIM, at my business, one thing we focus on a lot is childhood trauma. So there are things that might have occurred in your lifetime when you were younger, and they really shaped your perspective of things. They might have even shaped your personality. And we are almost conditioned to bury these experiences and not process them, not think about how did they actually impact the way that we're moving in this world. Unfortunately, when you come into a marriage, you are coming into a relationship that places such a heavy burden on your emotional vulnerability that all of that you thought you had buried might find its way out. And if you're not taking the time to heal from that and not recognizing how it's actually affected you, you are going to bring that into your relationship, and you might really set fire to something that would otherwise have been savable. And this is why it's really important, especially if you have those experiences, to either find a marriage coach or a therapist or a counselor, someone to help you process that, so that you're not bringing that into your relationship, or at the very least, you're able to have conversations and recognize how to put it in its place so it's not affecting your relationship. So healing from previous issues is really important. Also, if there are issues that you haven't healed from at all and they're constantly affecting your day-to-day life, addiction being the biggest thing. If you are in that mindset of trying to get married and you have certain issues that you haven't healed from that are consequently affecting you on a daily or even a weekly basis, it is very important. It is so essential that you deal with that before getting married. Please do not lie about it when you're talking to someone. Do not hide it. the other person has a right for you to go and heal that. Because when you step into a marriage, you're not stepping into a marriage to absorb someone else's pain, right? That is your job to heal from that. So please, guys, there are so many marriages, unfortunately, that had ended in disaster because of a huge vice that another person had that they thought that they could hide or be sneaky about. And that's just not something, and this is the only time where I can say, no, you are not ready, is if you have that major vice that you haven't dealt with. Whatever in addiction, I throw that out there because that's one of the bigger, more common types of issues that people are facing. Another thing to think about is really assessing your parents' relationship. We could do an entire lecture just on this. Maybe we will in the future, but assessing your parents' relationship, because whether you like it or not, your parents' relationship is the way, it's a lens through which you will understand marriage. And so let's say you have parents who had an amazing relationship. They were very respectful to each other. You just saw that they demonstrated a lot of love and kindness to one another. There was a good division of labor. They had a good marriage. You seeing that is going to help color your idea of marriage and help you to understand, well, this is what I want, and help you to be able to move towards that and to be able to assess partners based on this list that your parents created for you. On the other side of that, let's say your parents had a very toxic, unhealthy relationship. They weren't respectful to each other. They raised their voice constantly. They were constantly fighting people, or they were afraid to share their honest feelings or couldn't be vulnerable with one another. There was some type of abuse going on. Or let's say you watched, and maybe they're not married anymore. You saw a divorce happen and the divorce didn't happen very amicably. Or maybe you're one of the partners was an absentee partner. They left the relationship without finalizing a divorce. Whatever it might be in that situation, that colors your perspective and your understanding of a relationship. You are not going to be ready for marriage, and certainly not for a healthy marriage, if you do not assess that for yourself and understanding how that unhealthy marriage that you saw affected your understanding of marriage. It is very, very important to explore that and just think about, did it make, are you pleased with the way your parents' relationship went? And if you're displeased, it's not enough to just be displeased, but also thinking about why. What particular things did they do? What types of character traits did they exhibit that were unhealthy? And is that reflected in you at any point? Do you notice that you have certain tendencies like that? I mean, we are shaped by our environment, and our parents are part of that environment, and we learn a lot from our parents. And so we might have learned how to fight dirty from our parents. We might have learned that insulting someone is okay. We might have learned that shutting someone down when they're trying to express their emotions is okay. We might have learned manipulation. There are a lot of negative things that we can learn. And if we do not address and figure out what they are, then we're not going to be able to unlearn them. So that is all that I have for the lecture. We're going to address some questions. I'm just going to pull them up very quickly. Okay. So there are two questions that I actually can't address because one is a fiqh question, one is a hadith question. I am not an alim, I'm not a scholar. You can go ahead and actually check out any upcoming live sessions related to the topic, or check out our live chat service to refer you to someone who can actually answer the question. The question, one of them was basically that there was a book that someone was reading about that referenced Isa alayhi salam returning and marrying a woman from a particular tribe, and the person wanted to know if there are any hadith about this occurrence. I cannot answer that. I'm not a scholar of hadith. Another question was if a woman who has never been married before can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make someone their spouse in Jannah, even if that person is at the highest level of Jannah. I do not know the answer to that. My inclination is you're not married and you can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what you wish. And we should all ask for Allah. We should all ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the highest level of Jannah, regardless. That is by the advice of the Prophet. So we'll hold off on those questions. There is one question that I want to address. It's a really, really long one. I'll just sum it up. Basically, a sister is writing that she is currently being asked, her hand is being asked in marriage by someone that she had grown up with. On paper, he is a very good guy, has a good job, he's kind, respectful. And so, he is a suitable mate in all practical senses of the word. But she finds herself attracted to someone else. And she thinks that the other person might be attracted to her, but she has never had the conversation. And it's not going to happen due to family norms and values, and just it's taboo in her culture for that to be expressed. The thing is, she's unsure if this other person actually likes her or is interested in marriage, and she would have no way of knowing unless he asked for her hand. That would be the only way of her knowing. And he wouldn't be able to ask for her hand until he had a job, because that is a norm in her family, and that would be somehow in 5 years. So she was asking for advice on how to navigate this situation. Should she say yes to the person who's currently asking for her, even though she might feel regretful if she finds out that the other person was actually interested in her and just couldn't ask for her at that time? First, I just want to validate that this is a difficult situation to be in. And also, regardless of what the cultural values are, it is okay to have inclination towards other people. We cannot control who our heart leans towards. The best advice that I can give in this situation, and I can't give you you should do this or you should not do that, because, and I wish, sometimes we wish that someone would just do that for us and give us an answer, but ultimately this is our decision to make. It's your decision to make. So the first thing to do is you pray istikhara, right? And you mentioned that you've done that, and I say continue to do that, right? Because when we're making these big decisions, we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be an active part of that decision for us, and we want to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are pleased with his intervention and his guidance in this decision-making process. The other thing that I would advise, and for anyone watching this, anytime you have a big decision, it's really, really important to make the decision with the facts of the present reality. So you have to consider what is present right now, because if we keep entertaining what ifs, we are going to drive ourselves crazy. There is no way of knowing if in 5 years the other person would ask for your hand. There's no way of knowing whether he would not. And so the fact of the matter is you have what you say is a good brother asking for you. And so when you make the decision, you have to make it based on that. So am I okay with saying yes to this person and committing to this person? Or am I okay with rejecting the proposal? And regardless of what happens in the future, I'm okay with that. And I trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in allowing me to make that decision, that he will bring me to what is best for me in the future. And Allahu alam what ends up happening from that, but make the decision based on the present reality and the facts that you have in front of you. And ultimately, try your best to be content with your decision that you make for yourself, so long as you're not doing anything haram. I know family members are going to pressure you one way or another. Just remember that oftentimes it's because they love you, they care about you, they want the best for you. But when you make the decision, know that over time, inshallah, their pressure will kind of wane down. So don't let that be such a big, and I mentioned, because she mentioned that her family was pressuring her a lot. Don't let that be such a big factor in your decision making. They may pressure you one way or the other, but ultimately it's you who has to live with the decision. So again, so long as you're not doing anything haram, make that decision. And it seems from what you told me that your father is very comfortable with whatever decision you make. Your mother might feel some type of way, but again, all relationships can be mended. You just make sure you're doing your part, being respectful to your family, being respectful to your parents. And ultimately, I pray that whatever decision you make, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows it to be the best for you and give you peace in your heart with the decision and protect you from any harm from it. All right, guys, I hope that you guys enjoyed this Facebook Live. One thing that I do want to announce, if you guys like this Facebook Live, we are going to be diving way more deeply into the actual how to prepare yourself for marriage in an upcoming masterclass that is going to be happening Sunday, October 10th. This is going to be a webinar, one of the first that we're going to be doing on about Islam. The tickets are going to be sold, and the announcement hopefully should be coming tomorrow. But this is really an incredible opportunity. I'm going to be hosting it for you guys. We are going to go into so many different details, have really amazing discussions. You're going to get awesome activities tools, skills to use to help you prepare yourself for marriage. If we are able to prepare ourselves and help ourselves to be the healthy partners in the relationship, then we have already won half the battle of marriage. The next half is trying to find someone who's going to actually marry you. So ultimately, we ask that you guys keep an eye out for that masterclass, inshallah, and that you benefit. If you know anyone who's getting engaged or who's looking for marriage, invite them to this class because it's going to be extremely beneficial. And we just really, really hope that, inshallah, a lot of people are able to benefit. All right, guys, that is all that I have for you. It was very nice meeting you all. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.